Unit 8, Angle Relationships, Lesson 3, Parallel Lines Cut by a Transversal. So this should also be something you have examined before. We might take it up a notch or two as we look through the course of our questions, but just as a reminder of all the angle relationships that exist when parallel lines are cut by a transversal. So what is a transversal? As a reminder, the transversal is that line that cuts through or intersects the two parallel lines. Remember, parallel lines never intersect one another. They just go side by side forever and ever. But that line that cuts through both of the two parallel lines, or maybe even three, is called a transversal. When two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, 8 different angles are created. Here's a picture with some numbers in it so you can see those 8 different angles. And all 8 of those angles have a way that they are related to every other angle in that diagram. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing I want to talk about is interior versus exterior. Back when we studied polygons, we talked about interior and exterior angles. Interior angles were inside of your polygon. Well, with parallel lines, obviously we don't have a true inside and outside, but we do have in between. So interior is in between, and then exterior is going to be the ones that are on the outside. So there's some writing on there, but just to kind of highlight any of the angles in that blue area, so angles 3, 4, 5, and 6, would be our interior angles, and then the ones outside of that, which are still in the white areas, 1, 2, 7, and 8, would be exterior angles. That's going to be important because we're going to use those in some of our names. So one of the names is alternate interior angles. So over here on the left, way over here, is just the diagram with the 8 different angles named. And then here, 3 and 6 is a pair of alternate interior angles, and 4 and 5 is a pair of alternate interior angles. They are in between the parallel lines because they're interior, and they are on alternate sides of the transversal. Remember, alternate means different. So 3 is on the left, 6 is on the right. 5 is on the left, 4 is on the right. So in between and on different sides, alternate interior. Alternate interior angles are congruent, so they have the same measure as one another. Alternate exterior angles, so think about the name. Exterior means they're on the outside, so they're not between the parallel lines. And alternate sides of the transversal, so 1 and 8 is a pair of alternate exterior. And then 2 and 7 is a pair of alternate exterior. They're on the outside of the lines. One's on the left, the other's on the right. One's on the left, the other's on the right. Alternate exterior angles are congruent. And I'm not talking about like all 4 of them are congruent. 1 and 8 are congruent to each other. And then separately, 2 and 7 are congruent with one another. Next, we have consecutive interior angles. Interior, so they're in between the parallel lines, and consecutive means in a row, so they're on the same side of the transversal. They're in a row on the left, or they're in a row on the right. And consecutive interior angles are what we call supplementary. Supplementary means they add to 180 degrees. Then we have consecutive exterior. So they're outside of the parallel lines. Consecutive means on the same side of the transversal. So 1 and 7, both on the left. 2 and 8, both on the right. Consecutive exterior angles are supplementary or add to 180 degrees. When you are looking at vertical angles, linear pairs, alternate interior, alternate exterior, consecutive exterior, and you'd see all of those 8 angles that are made by the parallel lines and the transversal. You end up really with the fact that all 8 are related to one another in one of 2 ways. Either they're congruent, so all the red ones, 1 and 4, 5 and 8, all of those red angles, all 4 of them, are congruent to one another. All of them. So when you take a look at that, 1 and 4 are vertical, 4 and 5 are alternate interior, 5 and 8 are vertical, 1 and 8 are alternate exterior. 1 and 5 are what we call corresponding, and 4 and 8 are what we call corresponding, and we won't get too much into that one. But they're all equal. If one of them is said to be 100 degrees, they're all 100 degrees. The same thing happens with your green angles. 2 and 3 are vertical angles. 3 and 6 are alternate interior angles, and 6 and 7 are vertical angles, and 2 and 7 are alternate exterior. They all end up congruent. So if one of those is marked as 80 degrees, they're all 80 degrees. Then, the second way the angles can be related to one another is that they might add to 180 degrees. So every combination of a red and a green, they have to add up to 180. 1 and 2 are a linear pair. 2 and 4 are a linear pair. 3 and 4 are a linear pair. 3 and 1 are a linear pair. But you can also relate those down here. Not only all those linear pairs, but remember consecutive. So consecutive interior, a red and a green, they're going to add up to 180. Consecutive interior 4 and 6, a red and a green, they're going to add up to 180. Consecutive exterior 1 and 7, they're going to add up to 180. 2 and 8, they're going to add up to 180. So every time we end up with two possible outcomes, either they're the same or they add up to 180. Those are the only choices you have for how all those angles relate to one another. Now that slide my screen keeps wanting to go to. Find the measure of each angle and the value of x. So when I look over here, I see 8 angles. One of them has an expression written in it rather than a number. So 5x plus 35 is here. And then way down here at what would be angle number 7, we've got a 45 degrees. That's the only angle that's marked. So if this one is 45, then 3 other angles are all going to have that same measure. So 45 right here, and its vertical angle partner, so angle 6, would also be 45. Then if we look at 6 and 3, those are alternate interior, so they have to be congruent. So 3 would be 45. And vertical to angle 3 is angle 2. It would also be 45. So we could put 45 here, here, and here if we were using regular paper and pencil. Now remember, all the other angles are going to be the same as well, but not 45. They're going to be the same as each other. So 5, 8, 1, and then this one are all going to equal the same number. Remember, they have to add up to 180 degrees. So like if I think of these two down here, 45 and the 8 is a linear pair. These two are going to add up to 180. So 180 minus 45 is 135. So angle 8 is going to be 135. That means angle 5 is going to be 135. That means angle 1 is going to be 135. And it also means that this 5x plus 35 needs to equal 135. That's what you see down here at the very bottom of the slide. So we would subtract our 35, we'd get 5x equals 100, and then we would divide each side by 5, and we get x equaling 20. So that's what you're going to be spending your time with today, is looking at those vertical angles parallel lines cut by a transversal. Look for the vertical angles, linear pairs, but more importantly, look for alternate interior, alternate exterior, consecutive interior, consecutive exterior, and see how the angles all relate to one another.